It all started on James's birthday. I had planned everything meticulously. The surprise party, the guest list, his favorite cake from that little bakery on 5th, and even the perfect gift I knew he'd love. A limited edition leather briefcase he'd been eyeing for months. The night was perfect, or so I thought. Halfway through the party, amid the clinking of glasses and the hum of cheerful conversation, one of his coworkers handed him a sleek black velvet box. The crowd around him whistled and nudged each other knowingly. Gifts always stirred up excitement, but I felt a sudden pang of unease. James looked at me with that familiar lopsided grin of his, and opened the box slowly, building the suspense for the crowd. Inside was a watch, but not just any watch. It was a Tag Heuer, silver and black, with a minimalist yet striking design. I could see the admiration in his eyes as he held it up for everyone to see. "Wow!" he breathed out, slipping it on his wrist like it had always belonged there. "This is incredible. Who's it from?" I asked, smiling but feeling something twist in my gut. He glanced at the small card tucked into the lid of the box and frowned, tilting it to read the neat handwriting. Just says from a friend at work. No name. "A friend from work?" I repeated, my smile faltering. "Which friend?" He hesitated for a second too long. I don't know. Must be one of the guys on the new project team. We've got a lot of new faces these days." My eyes stayed on him longer than necessary, waiting for something more, but he just shrugged and kissed my cheek. "Guess I'll have to figure it out on Monday. Pretty nice, huh?" He tilted his wrist, admiring the watch under the soft glow of the kitchen lights. I nodded slowly, my gaze locked on the watch. Something about it didn't sit right with me, but I pushed it aside. It was his birthday. I didn't want to ruin it with my overthinking. But overthinking is a woman's curse, isn't it? Days passed and life moved on. I wanted to forget about the watch, to chalk it up to some overly generous coworker trying to earn points with the boss. But small things started to nag at me. James wore that watch constantly, more than any other watch he owned. I'd see him adjusting the strap in the mornings with that same small grin, almost like it was a private joke, only he understood. One Saturday, about 2 weeks later, I decided to run errands. James had gone golfing with the guys, so I figured I'd knock out a few things on my to-do list. As I pulled into the parking lot of a local home goods store, I noticed a familiar car parked 2 spots down from mine. A black Audi with a small dent on the rear bumper. It was her car. Her name was Melissa, one of James's coworkers. I'd met her once at an office holiday party. She was pretty younger than me, with perfectly straight hair that always looked freshly done, even at 9 a.m. She had that effortless beauty that some women are just born with, the kind that doesn't require filters or makeup tutorials. I glanced over, not really thinking much of it, until something caught my eye. There on the passenger seat of her car was a box. A black velvet box. The exact same box that James's watch had come in. My heart stopped. I felt the air leave my lungs in a slow, painful rush. I stared at that box, hoping, praying, that I was mistaken. Maybe it was for earrings or a bracelet. Maybe it was just something she bought for herself. But no. I knew that box. I remembered the sharp edges, the way the velvet had a slight sheen under the light. My palms started to sweat, and suddenly, I felt like I couldn't breathe. My eyes darted to the store entrance, and sure enough, Melissa walked out, phone in hand, laughing at something on her screen. She wore jeans and a loose blouse, her hair pulled back into a casual ponytail. And for some reason, that made me hate her even more. I watched her walk to her car, her steps light, her mood carefree, like she didn't have a single worry in the world. She opened the passenger door and picked up the box. I watched frozen as she flipped it open. There it was. The watch. James's watch. I felt my stomach drop so fast it made me dizzy. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady myself. It was the same watch. Silver and black. Minimalist design. The watch I'd seen on my husband's wrist every day for the past 2 weeks. Her fingers traced over the watch face, delicate and slow, like she was savoring it. Then she smiled. She smiled. She closed the box, tossed it back on the passenger seat like it was nothing, and drove away. I sat there for a long time, my heart thudding in my chest, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to ask. I could have followed her, confronted her, Screamed at her right there in the parking lot. But no. I needed proof. Cold, undeniable proof. That night, James came home like everything was normal. He kissed me on the cheek, asked what we were having for dinner, and went to take a shower. I waited until I heard the water running before I grabbed my phone. I pulled up the photo I'd taken in the parking lot. A clear, perfect shot of that familiar black box sitting on the passenger seat of Melissa's car. I typed out a message to James and attached the photo. It only took me a second to think of the perfect words. "You forgot your watch at Melissa's car, love." I hit send. A minute later, the shower stopped. Silence. My phone vibrated on the counter. One new message from James. I opened it, my hands steady, my breath unnervingly calm. 3 dots flickered as he typed. Then they stopped. Started again. Stopped. Finally, one message appeared. Just 3 words. "I can explain." My fingers hovered over the screen, my heart thudding in my chest like it was about to burst. But I didn't reply. Not yet. Let him sit with it. Let him stew in it. Because this wasn't just about a watch. This was about the lies. The ones he told me. And the ones I told myself. I stared at the message for a long time. I can explain. 3 words that somehow managed to feel heavier than any confession. My heart wasn't racing anymore. In fact, it was eerily calm, like the quiet before a storm. I read those words again and again, each time feeling something inside me shift. Disbelief faded into anger. Anger hardened into clarity. He was guilty. If he had been innocent, there would have been no hesitation. He would have called me, demanded to know what I was talking about, laughed it off, or maybe even gotten offended. But no. He sat there, typing, erasing, typing again, carefully crafting a response like he was negotiating with a hostage-taker. Except I was the one being held hostage. I put my phone down on the counter and stood there, gripping the edge of the sink so hard my fingers ached. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, feeling the cold realization settle over me. This is it. This is the moment everything changes. When he finally came out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around his waist, hair still wet and dripping onto his shoulders, he glanced at me with that same casual ease he'd always had. Like nothing had happened. Like he wasn't walking straight into a battlefield. "Hey," he said, running the towel over his head. "What's up? You okay?" I didn't answer right away. I watched him, studied him like he was a puzzle I had never fully solved. He looked so normal, so ordinary, and for some reason that made it worse. He wasn't panicked. He didn't know I'd already seen him for what he was. "You left something at work," I said finally, my voice even steady. He paused, blinking like he didn't understand. "Huh." I grabbed my phone, tapped the screen to wake it up, and held it up so he could see the photo. The black velvet box on the passenger seat of Melissa's car. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. His face changed. Not all at once, but in subtle shifts. His eyes darted from my phone to my face, then back to the phone. The muscles in his jaw tensed, and for a brief moment, I saw something flash in his eyes: fear. Not confusion. Not surprise. Fear. He rubbed the back of his neck like he always did when he was nervous. "Look, babe, I can explain, okay? It's not what you think." My eyes didn't move from his face. "Then tell me what it is." Silence. He glanced down, breathing in slowly like he was about to launch into some well-rehearsed monologue. But I'd seen enough courtroom dramas to know that look. He was stalling, searching for the lie that would sound just convincing enough. "Melissa's been going through a rough time," he said finally, his voice soft, almost apologetic. "She was talking about how she's been feeling unappreciated lately, so I gave her the watch as a gift. A friendly gesture. That's it." I let out a short, sharp laugh that surprised even me. It wasn't humor. It was disbelief, bitter, cold disbelief. I stared at him, waiting for him to realize how ridiculous he sounded. "You gave her the watch," I said slowly, each word like a stone dropping into still water. "The same watch you told me was from a friend at work, but somehow forgot his name?" I tilted my head, eyes narrowed. "Do you hear yourself, James? Do you hear how stupid you sound?" He opened his mouth, then closed it like a fish gasping for air. His eyes shifted around the room, looking for something, anything to anchor himself to. But there was nothing.
No lifeline.
No way out. You think I'm an idiot, I said, stepping forward now. You think you can look me in the eyes, spin some sad little story about helping a coworker, and I'm just going to believe it? After everything. I could feel my voice rising, the cracks starting to form. You lied to me. You lied about where that watch came from, and now you're lying again. I'm not lying, he said quickly, holding his hands up like I had a gun pointed at him. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd react like this. You're making it bigger than it is. My jaw tightened. Don't you dare try to turn this on me, James. Don't you dare. He stepped forward, hands still raised like he was approaching a wild animal. His eyes were wide, pleading now. Look, I know it looks bad, okay? But it's not like that. I didn't cheat on you. You didn't cheat on me? I repeated, feeling the heat rise to my face. My voice cracked and I hated that it did. Then why are you giving another woman gifts? Why are you hiding it from me? Why are you looking at me like you've been caught? He didn't answer. Silence. That damned silence. That's when I knew. I'd been hoping, praying even that he would say something, anything that would make it make sense. I would have accepted almost anything. Maybe the watch was for a charity auction. Maybe it was a company giveaway. Hell, maybe he'd lost a bet and owed her something. But no. He just stood there, eyes locked on mine, caught like a deer in headlights. Say it, I whispered, my voice trembling with rage. Say it, James. His breathing grew shallow. Say what? Say you gave her the watch because you wanted her to think of you every time she looked at it. I took another step toward him. Say you wanted her to think of you as the man who gave her something special. The man she could count on. The man who wasn't hers but somehow still hers. His eyes shut tight like he'd just been punched. He swayed slightly, hands still hovering in the air. Please stop. Stop. I laughed, bitter and hollow. No, James. You stop. You stop lying to my face like I'm too stupid to see what's right in front of me. He dropped his hands, his shoulders sagging like all the fight had drained out of him. It wasn't like that, he muttered, his voice small. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. Then why did it? I shot back. My chest heaved with every breath, every word carrying the weight of 1,000 broken promises. He didn't answer. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw him for what he was. A man who would never admit what he'd done, not fully. A man who would always leave just enough doubt in my mind to keep me guessing, to keep me second-guessing myself. But not anymore. I grabbed my phone off the counter, thumb hovering over the screen. I'm sending that photo to Melissa, I said, my eyes locked on his. I'm going to ask her how she's enjoying her little friendly gesture. No, he barked, lunging forward like he was going to grab my phone. I yanked it away, stepping back so fast I nearly knocked over a chair. I laughed, but it was hollow and sharp. There it is. There it is. I shouted, pointing at him like I just caught him red-handed. You weren't afraid of me seeing the truth. You were afraid of her seeing it. His breathing was shallow now, his face pale like he'd seen a ghost. He shook his head, eyes wide with desperation. Don't do this, please. It's not worth it. Not worth it. I said, my voice sharp as glass. No, James. You're not worth it. I didn't need to send the message. I didn't need to call Melissa. Because in that moment, I realized something far more important. I didn't need to stay. I didn't need to fight for someone who wouldn't fight for me. I didn't need to hear another excuse. I tossed my phone onto the couch and turned to face him one last time. Pack a bag, James. You can explain yourself to someone else. I walked out of the room, my heart pounding with every step. Not with fear. Not with sadness. But with the sound of freedom. I didn't look back as I walked down the hallway. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps slower, heavier than mine. He wasn't following me, not really. It was more like he was lingering, like he thought if he stayed close enough, he could still control the outcome. That maybe, just maybe, I'd stop, turn around, and give him one more chance to spin his story. But I didn't. I went straight to the bedroom, opened the closet, and yanked out my overnight bag. It was the same bag I'd packed for weekend trips to the cabin with him. Funny how something that once symbolized adventure and relaxation was now my escape route. I threw it on the bed, unzipped it, and started grabbing clothes. Jeans, sweaters, socks. I didn't even think about matching outfits. I wasn't packing to be pretty. I was packing to leave. I heard him come to the doorway. He didn't walk in. He just stood there leaning against the frame, arms crossed like he was trying to look calm, like he still had control. "Come on, Rachel," he said softly. His voice, that same practiced, gentle tone he used whenever he was trying to defuse an argument. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." I didn't answer. I folded a pair of jeans and shoved them into the bag, my movements sharp and precise. My heart wasn't racing anymore. My hands weren't shaking. There was something terrifyingly clear about my mind at that moment. Like the fog had lifted and everything in my life suddenly made sense. Every red flag I'd ignored. Every half-truth I'd let slide. Every late night at the office he justified with tight deadlines and client emergencies. "Rachel," he said again, a little louder now, a little more desperate. "You're really gonna throw everything away over a misunderstanding?" I turned to face him slowly, my hand still gripping a rolled-up sweatshirt. "Misunderstanding," I repeated, tilting my head just slightly. "You think I misunderstood the part where you gave another woman a gift that was meant for you? Or maybe I misunderstood the look on your face when you saw the photo." I took a step toward him. He didn't back away, but I could see his eyes shift, watching me like I was unpredictable now. He was right. I was unpredictable. "I'm not throwing anything away, James," I said quietly. "You threw it away the second you decided I wasn't enough." He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Don't insult me with another excuse. Don't tell me you were just being nice. Don't say you were trying to make her feel better. If you cared so much about making someone feel special, maybe you should have started with me." His face twitched like I'd hit a nerve. He uncrossed his arms and took a step into the room. "You're right," he said, his voice suddenly raw and honest in a way I hadn't heard in years. "You're right, okay? I messed up. I was stupid. I was careless. But it didn't mean anything, Rachel. I swear to God, it didn't mean anything." I blinked slowly, breathing in, breathing out. "It meant enough for you to lie about it," I said, meeting his eyes. "It meant enough for you to hide it. And if it didn't mean anything, then why did you care so much about me sending that photo to her?" His jaw clenched. There it was. The slip. I nodded slowly like I'd finally solved the puzzle. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. I turned back to the closet and pulled out a few more clothes, tossing them on the bed next to my bag. "Where are you gonna go?" he asked, his voice tight now, more defensive than pleading. "Huh? You think you're just gonna walk away like it's that easy?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Easy? Do you think this is easy?" I spun around to face him, and this time I didn't hold back. "You think it's easy packing up my life because my husband can't keep his boundaries with other women? You think it's easy to stand here, looking at you, and realizing I loved someone who doesn't respect me?" My chest was heaving now, my breath shallow and quick. "No, James. This isn't easy. But you know what's harder? Staying. Staying and pretending like I don't know what you are." He rubbed his face with both hands, groaning into his palms. "It wasn't an affair, Rachel," he said, his voice muffled. "I didn't sleep with her. I didn't cross that line." "Didn't you?" I shot back, eyes narrowing. "Because you know what, James? It's not just about sleeping with someone. It's about intimacy. It's about attention. You gave her a part of you that was supposed to be mine." He dropped his hands and glared at me now, his patience gone. "You're being dramatic," he snapped, his tone sharp and mean in a way I'd only seen glimpses of before. "You're really gonna throw away our marriage because of a watch?" "A watch," I repeated, laughing in disbelief. "This isn't about the watch, James. It's about you. It's about every little choice you made to lie to me, to hide things from me, to prioritize her feelings over mine." I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm not leaving over a watch. I'm leaving because I refuse to spend one more day being gaslit by the man who swore he'd protect my heart." He was quiet now. His lips pressed into a thin, angry line. He looked at me like I was a problem he couldn't solve. A glitch in his system. I saw him for what he was in that moment. A man who loved control more than he loved me. "Where are you gonna go, Rachel?" he said again, his voice low, almost mocking now. "Back to your mom's house like a teenager? You think you're gonna be happier without me?" I stared at him for a moment, letting his words settle in the air. Then I smiled. Not a big bright smile. Not a sad one either. It was small. Just enough to show him that he'd lost. "I'll be happier anywhere that's not here," I said quietly. His face shifted. For the first time I saw something like fear. Not the fear of being caught. Not the fear of losing control. It was the fear of being alone. I zipped up the bag and pulled it off the bed, slinging it over my shoulder. As I walked past him, I stopped in the doorway. I didn't look at him, but I knew he was watching me. I could feel the weight of his eyes on my back. "You're gonna regret this, Rachel," he said, his voice low but hard, like a threat disguised as a fact. "You're gonna realize you overreacted, and when you do, I won't be waiting for you to come crawling back." I turned my head just slightly, enough to glance at him from the corner of my eye. "Good," I said softly, my voice calm, steady, unshakable. "Because I'm not coming back." I walked out. I didn't run. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scream. I walked. Each step felt like shedding a layer of dead skin, each breath lighter than the last. When I reached the front door, I paused for a moment, letting my hand rest on the handle. Not because I was having second thoughts. Not because I needed time to think. I just wanted to remember this moment. The moment I chose myself. I opened the door, stepped outside, and closed it behind me. The air was cold and sharp, but it smelled like freedom. The weight I'd been carrying for years, the doubt, the fear, the insecurity. It all stayed behind that door with him. I walked to my car, tossed the bag in the back seat, and sat in the driver's seat for a minute, my hands resting on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't feel broken. I felt clean. The first thing I did was block his number. The second thing I did was drive. No plan. No destination. Just forward. Always forward. The road stretched out ahead of me, dark but somehow inviting. The glow of streetlights flickered through the windshield like distant stars, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. Really breathe. Deep, steady, full breaths that reached all the way down to my stomach. No tightness in my chest. No second-guessing. Just air. I didn't know where I was going, and for once that didn't scare me. I drove with the windows cracked, letting the cold night air rush in. It stung my skin, sharp and bracing, but I welcomed it. It felt real. I needed something real after all the lies I'd been swallowing. I passed familiar streets, places James and I had driven past 100 times together. I glanced at the diner where we used to grab late-night pancakes when we were too tired to cook. The gas station where he'd once run in to buy me chocolate on a bad day. The old movie theater where we'd watch cheesy horror films on lazy weekends. Every place was stained with his fingerprints. Every streetlight a spotlight on the life we'd built together. But now all I could see were cracks. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, eyes straight ahead. Don't look back. I told myself. Don't you dare look back. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of a small motel on the edge of town. The neon vacancy sign buzzed like a fly trapped in a jar, its red glow flickering on and off in a lazy rhythm. It wasn't glamorous. The kind of place you see in movies where someone's running from something or someone. Felt fitting. I parked the car, grabbed my overnight bag from the back seat, and walked inside. The lobby smelled faintly of old carpet and lemon-scented cleaner. A man in a faded flannel shirt sat behind the counter, eyes glued to a tiny TV playing reruns of some old cop show. He barely looked up when I approached. "Room for one?" he asked, already reaching for a key. "Yeah," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Like I wasn't used to speaking for myself. Maybe I wasn't. "Cash or card?" he asked, sliding the key across the counter. "Card," I muttered, pulling out my wallet. I handed it to him, watching as he slid it through the old card reader, the machine letting out a tired beep. "Checkout's at 11, he said, handing the card back to me along with the key. "Wi-Fi's spotty, but it works if you're patient." I nodded and walked toward the hallway, my steps slow but deliberate. The air smelled like old air conditioners and damp concrete, but I didn't care. I wasn't here for comfort. I just needed space. Room 112. The key slid into the lock with a heavy clunk, and when I opened the door, I was met with a rush of stale air. The room was small, with beige walls and ugly floral-patterned bedspreads that looked older than me. There was a tiny table with a single chair and a TV bolted to the wall. The curtains were half open, revealing a view of the parking lot. I could see my car from here. I closed the door, locked it, and set the chain in place. Then I just stood there for a moment, staring at the room. I dropped my bag onto the bed, sat on the edge, and let out a long, shuddering breath. Alone. No footsteps coming down the hall. No phone buzzing with texts I'd have to decipher for hidden meanings.
No pretending.
Alone. For the first time, the weight of it hit me. The weight of being on my own. No one was coming to save me, and no one was coming to ruin me. It was just me, sitting in a cheap motel room at 10:37 p.m. with nothing but the clothes I'd packed in a hurry. I let myself feel it. I didn't push it away. I let every ounce of anger, sadness, and exhaustion crash down on me like a wave. My eyes stung, my chest felt hollow, and my throat ached from holding in too many unsaid words. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I reached for my phone. The one thing I'd sworn I wouldn't do. I sat there, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the screen. I knew he'd text me. Men like James always do. They don't know how to lose. Sure enough, when I unlocked the screen, there were 5 new messages. James, 7:42 p.m. Baby, come on. Let's talk. You're being emotional. James, 7:54 p.m. I didn't do anything wrong. I swear on everything, Rachel. James, 8:10 p.m. Do you really want to end our marriage over something so small? James, 8:45 p.m. Call me. Please. Just call me. James, 9:02 p.m. Fine. If you want to ruin everything, that's on you. I read them all slowly, feeling each one like a small push against my chest. Baby, come on. You're being emotional. That's on you. The shift was so familiar. First he was pleading. Then he was reasoning. And finally, when he realized I wasn't bending, he went for blame. I knew this dance. I'd been dancing it for years. I hovered my thumb over the block contact button. My heart pounded in my chest, my thumb frozen in place. Blocking him felt so final. Like closing a door I could never open again. But that was the point, wasn't it? My eyes stayed on the last message. If you want to ruin everything, that's on you. For so long I believed that lie. That everything was my fault. That if I just loved him harder, supported him more, forgave him faster, he would change. But people don't change just because you love them. They change because they want to. And James? He didn't want to. I pressed block contact. No warning. No second chance.
No hesitaste.
Just one clean, sharp motion. Gone. I stared at the screen for a second, feeling an odd kind of peace settle over me. Like I'd finally taken out the trash after smelling it for too long. I tossed the phone onto the nightstand and leaned back against the headboard, closing my eyes. Silence.
No buzzing. No texts.
No sudden dread in the pit of my stomach. Just quiet. I sat like that for a while, eyes closed, letting the quiet fill every crack that James had left behind. Slowly, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was small, subtle, but powerful. I did it. I left. No one had to convince me. No one had to rescue me. I did it. I walked away from a man who thought I'd never have the guts. I stood up, feeling my legs a little shaky but strong enough. I walked to the mirror on the wall and looked at myself. Same face. Same eyes. Same woman. But I felt different. I leaned forward, brushing my hair behind my ears, staring at myself like I was meeting someone new for the first time. You're okay, I whispered. You're okay now. And I believed it. I didn't need him. I didn't need his explanations, his excuses, or his breadcrumbs of affection. I didn't need to fight for his love like it was a prize to be earned. Love isn't supposed to feel like a competition. I turned away from the mirror, climbed into bed, and pulled the blanket over me. It was scratchy and thin, but it felt better than the 1,000 thread count sheets I'd shared with him, because this bed was mine. I closed my eyes and let myself be still. No more checking the door. No more listening for footsteps. No more bracing for the next lie. Sleep didn't come right away, but when it did, it wasn't filled with dreams of him. For the first time in years, my dreams were just mine. No more chasing. No more doubting. Just peace. The next morning, sunlight streamed in through the thin curtains, landing right on my face. It was that sharp, unforgiving kind of light that made everything too clear. I squinted against it, pulling the blanket over my head, but it was no use. I was awake. No warm arm draped over my waist. No steady breathing next to me. Just me in a bed that smelled like old fabric softener and time. I blinked up at the ceiling for a while, letting the reality of it sink in. I really left. No dream. No last-minute change of heart. No crawling back. I reached for my phone out of habit, only to remember that I'd blocked him. For a moment, panic bubbled up in my chest, the old reflex of wondering if I'd missed a call, or if he'd sent a sorry text while I was sleeping. But there was nothing. Nothing but silence. I sat up slowly, legs hanging off the side of the bed, feet touching the cold floor. Didn't feel real yet. The weight of it, the finality of it, hadn't fully settled in. Part of me still expected him to call, to say something to drag me back. Part of me still believed I'd see his name light up my screen and feel that familiar stupid tug of hope. But hope was a dangerous thing. It had kept me tethered to him far longer than I should have stayed. I took a deep breath, feeling it fill my chest, then let it out slowly. The air felt cleaner, sharper somehow, like it had been filtered through something pure. I stood up, walked over to the window, and pulled the curtains aside. The parking lot below was quiet. Few cars. An old man walking his dog. Just an ordinary day. What do I do now? That was the question, wasn't it? I had no plan. No destination. Just me, a duffel bag of clothes, and a heart that felt like it had been wrung out and left to dry. I stared out the window, letting the sunlight warm my face. The old Rachel would have called someone. Her mom. Her best friend. Someone to say I did it. I left him. What do I do now? But I didn't want to be that woman anymore. The one who needed someone else to tell her what to do. No. I'd already proven to myself that I didn't need anyone to make decisions for me. I'd made the hardest decision of all, and I did it on my own. I turned away from the window and grabbed my bag. I'd slept in the clothes I left in, leggings and a hoodie, but I dug through the bag for something fresh. Jeans, a t-shirt, sneakers.
No makeup. No jewelry.
Just me. Unpolished. Untouched. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror as I zipped up my bag. I didn't look broken. Tired, sure. A little rough around the edges. But not broken. I grabbed my keys, slung the bag over my shoulder, and walked out of the room. I didn't bother looking back. I'd already done enough of that for one lifetime. The guy at the front desk barely glanced at me as I dropped the room key on the counter. I walked past him, out the door, and into the crisp morning air. It smelled like concrete after rain, even though it hadn't rained. The air felt new. The engine of my car rumbled to life, and I sat there for a second, gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. No plan. No destination. Just forward. Always forward. I drove for miles. Past gas stations, strip malls, and neighborhoods that all started to look the same. I didn't care where I was going as long as it wasn't back. Every mile felt like a piece of armor being added to me, one layer at a time. The farther I went, the less I thought about him. About her. About them. Eventually, I found myself on the edge of town, pulling into a diner I'd never seen before. It was one of those old-school places with red vinyl booths and a flashing open 24 hours sign. I parked and sat there for a moment watching people inside. An older couple sharing pancakes. A young guy in a hoodie scrolling on his phone. A waitress carrying 3 plates at once like it was nothing. I got out of the car. The little bell above the door jingled as I walked in. Warm air and the smell of coffee and bacon surrounded me. It was louder than I expected. The clatter of dishes, the low hum of conversation, the crackle of the kitchen grill. A waitress with tired eyes but a kind smile waved me toward a booth. "Sit anywhere you like, honey," she said, balancing a coffee pot in one hand. I slid into a booth near the window. The seat was cold at first, but it warmed quickly. I glanced at the menu, though I already knew I'd order coffee. Maybe toast. I wasn't really hungry, but I needed something to do with my hands. The waitress came over, flipping open her notepad. Her name tag said Linda. She had the look of a woman who'd seen everything and stopped being surprised by most of it. "Coffee?" she asked, already pouring before I answered. "Yeah," I said. "And some toast."
Butter, no jelly.
She nodded, jotted it down, and walked away. Simple. No questions.
No explanations.
Just an order and a nod. I leaned back in the booth, hands wrapped around the warm coffee mug she'd left in front of me. The heat soaked into my skin, grounding me. My mind was quieter now, like the storm had finally passed. No more racing thoughts. No more imaginary arguments with James. Just the quiet hum of a diner on a Tuesday morning. I sipped my coffee slowly, tasting the bitterness on my tongue. It wasn't good coffee, but it was real. No oat milk, no caramel drizzle. No special request scribbled on the side of a paper cup. Just plain black coffee. I liked it more than I thought I would. Linda came back with my toast, set it down without a word, and walked away. I watched her move through the diner, talking to customers, laughing at something an old man said at the counter. She didn't know me. She didn't care about my story. And for some reason that made me feel safe. I ate my toast slowly, one bite at a time. I didn't rush. I didn't scroll through my phone. I just sat there, tasting every bite like I had all the time in the world. Halfway through my second piece I felt it. Not a sharp pain. Not a breakdown. Just a slow, warm shift in my chest. I set the toast down and realized what it was. Relief. Not happiness. Not joy. Not yet. But relief. For so long I'd been carrying him. Carrying us. Every doubt. Every argument. Every lie I convinced myself to believe. But now, sitting in this diner with toast crumbs on my fingers, I realized I didn't have to carry any of it anymore. I put it down. It didn't happen all at once. I didn't feel an explosion of freedom or some grand epiphany. It was quieter than that. Softer. It felt like taking off a heavy coat you'd been wearing for too long, and realizing just how light you could be. I paid my bill with cash, left a tip for Linda, and walked outside. The sun was higher now, warmer on my skin. I tilted my head back, eyes closed, and let it soak in. No plan. No destination. Just forward. I got back in the car and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. I could go anywhere. I could turn left. I could turn right. I could keep driving until I hit the ocean if I wanted to. My phone buzzed. A text. For a second my heart jumped. Did I forget to block him? Did he find another way to reach me? I glanced at the screen. It wasn't James. It was my best friend Emma. Emma, 10:12 morgens he. You okay? I just have a feeling. Call me when you can. I stared at the message for a moment. A feeling. She always did have that strange, unexplainable intuition when something was wrong. I smiled, small but real. I tapped out a quick reply. Me, 10:13 a.m. I'm okay. I'm finally okay. Then I turned off my phone, set it on the seat beside me, and pulled out of the parking lot. No plan. No destination. Just forward. Always forward. I drove for hours. No music, no podcasts. Just the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the soft whoosh of passing cars. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. Every mile put more distance between me and the version of myself I'd been with him. The quiet, accommodating woman who let herself shrink just to make room for him. I didn't know where I was going, and for once that didn't scare me. For the first time in a long time, not knowing felt like freedom. The landscape changed as I drove. Suburbs melted into open fields. Rows of houses gave way to wide stretches of road with nothing but farmland on either side. The sun was higher now, golden and bright, illuminating everything like it was trying to remind me that the world was still turning. Birds flew in lazy loops across the sky. The clouds were soft and scattered, like pieces of cotton pulled apart by gentle hands. I caught myself smiling at nothing. Not a big, ridiculous grin. Just a small, quiet smile that felt like it belonged to me and me alone. At some point, I pulled into a rest stop. It wasn't much. Just a small parking lot with a few picnic tables and vending machines. A couple of people sat at one of the tables, a father with 2 kids sharing a bag of chips. I parked at the far end, away from them, and leaned back in my seat, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My phone was still off, sitting face down on the passenger seat. I glanced at it, tempted for a moment to turn it back on. Not because I wanted to hear from James. I'd blocked him. And that wasn't going to change. But I wondered if Emma had replied. I wondered if my mom had texted. She always did that. Sent me little thinking of you messages. Even when she didn't know anything was wrong. It was her way of reminding me I wasn't alone. I reached for the phone, then stopped. Not yet. I leaned my head back, closed my eyes, and just listened. Birds chirping in the distance. The faint crunch of gravel under tires as a car pulled into the lot. The rustling of leaves as a light breeze blew through the nearby trees. It felt good to sit still, to not be rushing toward something or away from something, to just exist in a moment that wasn't defined by anyone else's needs or expectations. For so long my life had been built around James, his schedule, his work, his moods. I'd let his storms dictate my weather, and I hadn't even realized it. But not anymore. I opened my eyes and looked at the trees swaying gently in the breeze. They didn't fight the wind. They didn't resist it. They moved with it. Maybe that's what I needed to do. Move with the changes instead of fighting them. I sat there for a while longer, breathing slow and steady. My mind wasn't racing like it used to. It was quiet. And I didn't feel the need to fill that quiet with explanations or justifications. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for why I left. I knew why I left, and that was enough. Eventually, I got back on the road. No GPS, no map, just the road ahead. I followed it like it was a thread pulling me forward. It wasn't about getting to a specific place. It was about letting myself move. Hours passed. Towns came and went. I stopped for gas at a little station with a hand-painted sign that said last stop for 20 miles. The cashier was a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a bun. She smiled at me like she knew I was running from something, but didn't need to ask what. Need anything else, hon? She asked as she rang me up. No, I said, smiling back at her. I'm good. Her eyes lingered on me a moment longer, like she was searching for something. And then she nodded. Well, take care of yourself, she said, sliding my receipt across the counter. Road's long, but it's better than standing still. I nodded, swallowing down the sudden tightness in my throat. Yeah, I said quietly. It is. Back in the car, I sat there for a moment with the receipt still in my hand. The road's long, but it's better than standing still. I folded the receipt and tucked it into the pocket of my jeans. I didn't know why, but it felt like something I should keep. Another 2 hours passed, maybe more. Time started to feel loose, like it wasn't something I had to measure anymore. I wasn't rushing to get anywhere. I wasn't late for anything. I wasn't trying to meet anyone's expectations. At some point, I spotted a sign for a scenic overlook. I almost drove past it, but at the last second I veered onto the exit ramp. The road climbed higher, winding up a hill with trees lining both sides. My tires crunched over gravel as I pulled into the overlook. There were only 2 other cars parked there. An old blue pickup truck and a sedan with a sunshade propped up in the windshield. I parked at the edge of the lot, where the trees opened up to a view so wide it made my breath catch. I got out of the car and walked to the edge of the lookout. Below me, the world stretched out in every direction. Rolling hills, fields of green and gold, tiny houses dotting the landscape like little toy models. I leaned on the wooden railing and stared at it all. I'd spent so much of my life looking at my world through a narrow little frame. Work. Home. James. I thought that was it. I thought that was all there was. But standing here with the world stretched out in front of me like a painting, I realized how small my world had been. There was so much more. So much more. I stayed there for a long time, letting the wind whip my hair around, letting the sun warm my skin. I didn't think about James. I didn't think about Melissa. I didn't think about anything except how big the world was, and how small I had let myself feel for too long. My phone was still off, tucked away in my bag, and I realized I didn't want to turn it back on. I didn't want to be reachable. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow either. I didn't owe anyone my presence. I didn't owe anyone my silence either. The wind picked up stronger now and I smiled. Not a small sad smile. Not a polite one. A big, bright, reckless smile that made my face ache a little. I laughed under my breath, just to hear the sound of it. It had been so long since I'd laughed for no reason. So long since I'd felt this kind of lightness. I didn't know what was next. I didn't have a grand plan. I didn't have it all figured out. But for the first time I was okay with that. I was okay with not knowing. The wind blew stronger, and I spread my arms out like I used to do as a kid, pretending I could fly. I tilted my head back, eyes closed, letting the sun and the wind hit my face. No plan. No destination. Just forward. Always forward. I stayed at that overlook until the sun dipped low in the sky, turning everything gold and orange. It was the kind of light that makes you feel like the world is giving you a soft, quiet goodbye, not forever, just for now. I watched the shadows stretch across the fields below, long and slow, like they were in no rush to leave. That was how I wanted to live from now on.
No rush.
No pressure. No more feeling like I had to hold everything together just to keep someone else from falling apart. When the air got colder, I finally walked back to the car. My hands brushed along the side of it as I circled around to the driver's door. I stood there for a second just looking at it, thinking about all the miles I'd put behind me today. The motel. The diner. The gas station. The old woman who told me the road was better than standing still. She was right. I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door and sat there for a moment. My bag was still in the back seat, half-zipped, my phone somewhere inside. I didn't reach for it. I didn't even think about it. Instead, I stared out the windshield at the view one last time, memorizing every detail of it. The rolling hills. The fading sunlight. The distant houses that looked so small from up here, like I could pick them up and put them in my pocket. For so long I'd felt like my life was small. Like I was small. Like my whole world was just one man, one house, one endless cycle of apologies and compromises. But from up here I realized something. I was never small. I just let him make me feel that way. That thought hit me harder than anything else had all day. It was like a weight lifted off my chest, one I hadn't even known I was carrying. I breathed in deep, let it out slow, and felt something inside me shift. I wasn't small. I was never small. I reached into the back seat, dug through my bag and found my phone. For a second I just held it, feeling its weight in my hand. I turned it on and watched the screen flicker to life. A few seconds later it buzzed. A flood of notifications popped up. Emma, 2:13 p.m. You good? Just checking in. Call me if you need to talk. Mom, 3:27 p.m. Thinking of you, sweetheart. Call when you can. Emma, 4:02 p.m. I'm starting to get worried. Say something, please. No messages from James. He knew. Maybe he'd tried to call before I blocked him. Maybe he'd stared at his phone angry, waiting for me to come crawling back like I always had. But he didn't send a message. No, where are you? No come. No, im shuri. And that was fine. I didn't need it. I tapped Emma's name and hit call. It rang twice before she picked up. Rachel. Her voice was sharp with worry. Oh my God, where have you been? I've been freaking out all day. I laughed, and the sound of it caught me off guard. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was soft, light like air. Imukai. I promise. I'm okay now. She exhaled so hard I could hear the relief through the phone. Jesus, you scared me. Did something happen? Did he? He didn't do anything I didn't already know he was capable of, I said, cutting her off gently. I leaned back in my seat, staring at the horizon, watching the sun slip just a little lower. But I left him. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I imagined her sitting on her couch, eyes wide, mouth open in shock. I could picture it so clearly, like I was right there next to her. You left him, she said slowly, like she was tasting the words. I left. I repeated, letting the weight of it fill me up. I'm gone, Em. I'm not going back. Oh my God, she breathed. I could hear the smile in her voice. Oh my God, Rachel. I'm so proud of you. You hear me? I'm proud of you. My eyes stung, and I pressed the heel of my hand against them. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't sad. I was just full of everything I hadn't let myself feel for years. Thanks, Em. I said, my voice thick. I needed to hear that. You should have heard it a long time ago, she said, no hesitation, no doubt. But I'm saying it now. I'm so proud of you. Where are you right now? Do you need me to come get you? Where are you staying tonight? I glanced at the view, the hills rolling out like an endless sea of green and gold. I'm not sure, I admitted, smiling a little. But I'm okay with that. We talked for a while after that. She didn't push me for details, and I didn't offer any. It was enough just to hear her voice, to know someone was on the other end of the line, who didn't need me to explain everything. She didn't need me to justify why I left. She didn't need me to prove I was strong. She already knew I was. By the time I hung up, the sun was almost gone, the sky a deep, burning orange fading to blue. I watched it for a while, thinking about all the nights I'd spent sitting at home, waiting for James to come back from working late. The times I'd told myself he'll change, or this is just a rough patch, or every couple goes through this. I'd told myself a lot of lies. But now, I knew the truth. Love isn't supposed to feel like waiting. It's not supposed to feel like hoping someone will become a better version of themselves. Love isn't supposed to leave you questioning your worth every night before you fall asleep. I didn't know where I'd go next, but I knew I'd never go back to that version of myself. The version that stayed quiet. The version that settled for scraps of affection. I started the car. The engine hummed softly, steady and sure. I looked at the road ahead of me, stretching on and on with no end in sight. It wasn't scary anymore. It was open. Wide open. I gripped the wheel, took a deep breath and smiled. No plan. No destination. Just forward. Always forward.